Welcome back to PodX Studio. Today, we're going deep into the Mughal Empire.
Okay.
Specifically the reign of Emperor Aurangzeb. Now, if you're new to history, Aurangzeb's name might just sound like another figure from, like a dusty textbook.
Yeah.
But trust me, his story is anything but boring.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to be using Audrey Trishke's book, Aurangzeb, the Man and the Myth, as our guide.
It's a fantastic choice.
Yeah.
Trishke really digs into the historical evidence to separate fact from fiction.
Oh, that's so important.
Which is crucial when talking about a ruler as complex as Aurangzeb.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty,
Yeah.
can we set the stage a little bit for our listeners?
Sure.
What was the Mughal Empire all about? And why should we care about Aurangzeb?
Excellent point. Imagine India in the 16th to 18th centuries.
Okay.
The Mughal Empire, founded by Babur in 1526, wasn't just some regional power.
Right.
It dominated almost the entire Indian subcontinent. We're talking about a vibrant mix of cultures, languages, and religions, all under the rule of these emperors.
Okay.
Aurangzeb, the sixth Mughal emperor, ruled for almost 50 years.
Wow.
Longer than any of his predecessors.
That's a long time.
He expanded the empire to its greatest extent,
Okay.
but his reign was also marked by controversies and challenges.
So no pressure then for this guy.
Right.
Aurangzeb clearly wasn't just some random emperor.
Absolutely.
We made a real impact.
And that's why it's so important to understand him beyond just the headlines.
Right. No more Aurangzeb who
Yeah.
after this deep dive.
Exactly.
So let's get into his story.
Okay.
Where does it all begin?
Aurangzeb was born on November 3rd, 1618,
Okay.
into a family steeped in power and ambition.
Wow.
His grandfather was Akbar the Great, often considered the most influential Mughal emperor,
Okay.
known for his religious tolerance and administrative reforms.
Whoa. Talk about a legacy to live up to.
It certainly shaped Aurangzeb's upbringing.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets interesting. Okay.
While his grandfather was known for his openness, Aurangzeb was deeply devout and took a much stricter approach to Islam.
Okay.
This difference in religious outlook would have major consequences for his reign.
I'm sensing some family drama brewing already.
You think so?
Did his stricter religious views cause tension with his family?
There's definitely evidence of that.
Okay.
Trishka highlights how Aurangzeb's piety contrasted with the more lavish lifestyles of some of his siblings,
Right.
which likely contributed to rivalries and tensions within the family.
Okay, so we've got this ambitious prince raised in the shadow of a legendary grandfather, but also holding strong religious convictions that might set him apart from his family.
Yeah,
It sounds like a recipe for an epic story.
it really does.
What happens next?
Well, like any good drama, there's a power struggle.
Okay.
When his father, Emperor Shah Jahan, became ill in 1657, Aurangzeb wasn't content to just wait in the wings.
Right.
He saw an opportunity to seize the throne, and he was ruthless in his pursuit of power. So not exactly a peaceful transition of power then.
Not at all.
Oh, wow.
It was a full-blown war of succession.
Wow.
Aurangzeb battled his brothers, imprisoned his father,
Oh, man.
and ultimately emerged victorious, becoming the emperor of the Mughal Empire in 1658.
Talk about a dramatic rise to power. It sounds like something out of Game of Thrones.
It really does.
But I have to ask, executing his own brothers?
Right.
Was that really necessary?
It's certainly shocking by today's standards,
Yeah.
but to understand Aurangzeb's actions, we have to consider the political climate of the time.
Okay.
In the Mughal world, succession wasn't always a clear-cut process.
Right.
It was a time of intense competition,
I see.
and violence was often seen as a way to secure power and eliminate rivals.
So it's like winner takes all, but with incredibly high stakes.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, how did this brutal power struggle shape Aurangzeb as a ruler?
That's a key question.
Yeah.
Some historians argue that this early experience hardened him, making him more cautious and suspicious.
Makes sense.
He was always wary of potential threats,
Right.
both from within his family and from external enemies.
That makes sense.
Once you've seen firsthand how quickly power can shift,
Right.
you'd probably be a bit more on guard.
I get it.
And this wariness shaped many of his decisions as emperor.
Okay, so we've got the background, powerful family, devout upbringing, and a brutal fight for the throne.
Yeah.
Now that he's emperor, what kind of ruler does Aurangzeb turn out to be?
Well, he wasn't just a warrior king.
Okay.
He was also a deeply religious man, a skilled administrator,
Okay.
and a complex figure who defied easy categorization.
So the real deep dive begins here.
Yeah.
I'm already intrigued.
Yeah.
Let's unpack this further.
Okay.
What are some of the key things we need to understand about Aurangzeb's rule?
Sure.
And how do those connect back to his personality and experiences?
Right. So we were talking about how his early experiences, especially that intense fight for the throne, might have shaped his approach to ruling the Mughal Empire.
Right. And I think it's fascinating how personal experiences can have such a big impact on how a leader governs.
Right.
So he's emperor now. He's clearly ambitious, but he's also deeply religious. How does that play out in his policies?
It's one of the most debated aspects of Aurangzeb's reign.
Okay.
He was a devout Muslim.
Right.
And he saw it as his duty to uphold Islamic law and principles in his empire.
Okay.
This led him to make some pretty controversial decisions.
Okay, let's get into some specifics.
Yeah.
What were some of these controversial decisions?
Sure.
And how did people react?
Well, one of the most significant was his decision to reinstate the jizya tax, a tax levied on non-Muslims.
Okay.
This had been abolished by his great-grandfather, Akbar, as part of his policy of religious tolerance. But Aurangzeb believed it was his duty to uphold Islamic law.
Okay.
And the jizya was part of that. He also ensured that the revenue that was collected from the jizya was used for public works projects that benefited all communities.
So it wasn't simply a matter of, imposing a tax on non-Muslims. There was a broader context here.
Absolutely.
The social justice.
Yes.
And an equitable distribution of resources.
Exactly. Aurangzeb continued to employ Hindus in key administrative positions, and he maintained these strong alliances with Rajput princes, who played a very vital role in the Mughal military.
I mean, that's a really important point because it suggests that, his governance wasn't solely based on religious affiliation.
Right.
It was based on competence and loyalty. I can imagine that didn't go over well with everyone. Wasn't the Mughal Empire known for being pretty diverse religiously?
Absolutely. It was a complex mix of Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and other religious communities.
Right.
So bringing back a tax specifically targeting non-Muslims definitely created tension and resentment.
So was this just about religious beliefs, or were there other political motivations at play here?
It's likely a bit of both. Trishka argues that we can't just dismiss Aurangzeb as a religious fanatic.
Okay.
He was a shrewd politician as well.
Right.
The jizya wasn't just about religious piety.
Okay.
It was also a source of revenue for the empire, which needed funds to maintain its vast army and administration.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Running an empire that size couldn't have been cheap.
Right.
But still, it seems like a risky move, potentially alienating a huge chunk of your population.
It was definitely a calculated risk, and it speaks to the complexities of Aurangzeb's character.
Right.
He was trying to balance his religious convictions with the practical realities of ruling a vast and diverse empire.
Right.
Sometimes those two goals were in direct conflict.
It sounds like a real tightrope walk.
It was.
He's trying to appease different groups, maintain order, expand his empire, and uphold his personal beliefs all at the same time. What else besides the jizya tax did he do that was seen as controversial?
Aurangzeb also took steps to limit the public practices of religions other than Islam.
Okay.
For example, he banned the construction of new Hindu temples and even destroyed some existing ones.
Wow.
Though the extent of this destruction is debated by historians.
Okay.
He also placed restrictions on music and dance performances at court, as these were seen as distractions from religious devotion.
These actions seem to contradict the image of a just and tolerant ruler.
Numerous examples from court records and chronicles that describe how Aurangzeb would hold these public audiences.
Wow.
Where anyone, regardless of their social standing, could come and bring their grievances to him directly.
I mean, imagine being able to have your case heard by the emperor himself.
Right.
That's pretty remarkable.
That's a level of accessibility that you don't really see from rulers, at that time. And what's even more interesting is that specific cases where Aurangzeb actually overturned rulings that had been made by lower courts in favor of the common people.
So it's not just about accessibility.
No.
It's really about ensuring that...
It's about just outcomes.
Right.
And that justice was really served.
And this dedication to fairness wasn't limited to just legal matters. Aurangzeb's efforts to promote economic stability.
Yes.
Now that may sound a bit dry, but I think it's so important.
Yeah.
Because it has a huge impact on people's everyday lives.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And really work to streamline the process of tax collection to ensure that the resources of the empire were being used effectively.
Right. So instead of, squandering money on lavish parties and unnecessary luxuries,
Right.
he was really focused on making sure that the people
Right.
benefited
from
the empire's wealth.
Yeah, from the empire's wealth.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's not just about saving money.
Right.
It's about investing in things
Exactly.
that are going to benefit the common good.
Yeah, like infrastructure, for example.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
Aurangzeb's public works programs.
Like roads and bridges.
Exactly. Historical accounts that document these extensive efforts that he made to improve the infrastructure throughout the empire.
I mean, can you imagine how transformative that would have been?
Oh, absolutely.
Especially for, rural communities.
No. Yeah, it would have made their lives so much easier having access to better roads and irrigation.
And for merchants, too, right?
Oh, absolutely. For merchants, it would have made it so much easier and safer to be able to transport their goods.
Right. And that stimulates the economy.
Exactly. Boosting trade, stimulating the economy.
So it seems like he was really focused on creating a stable and prosperous society
Yeah.
for all of his subjects, not just the elites.
Absolutely. And you see this kind of pragmatic approach
Yeah.
in other areas of his reign as well, like foreign relations, for example. He shunned the excesses of courtly life and really dedicated himself to prayer and religious study.
I remember reading about his practice of, sewing caps
Yeah.
and copying the Quran.
It's a very striking image of a powerful emperor
Right.
engaging in these very simple, humble tasks.
These practices were a reflection of his deep piety and his belief in leading by example.
Yes, he wasn't just preaching religious values.
Right.
He was embodying them in his own life.
It's incredibly powerful. It speaks to a level of sincerity
Yes.
and commitment that I find quite inspiring.
Absolutely. And it just adds another layer to our understanding of Aurangzeb as a very complex and fascinating figure.
These different aspects of his life, his faith, his policies, his personal conduct,
Right.
to create this, more holistic portrait.
It's really a testament to her scholarship and her commitment to really challenging us to see history
Right.
with fresh eyes.
This has been such an enlightening conversation. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
What aspects of Aurangzeb's faith and governance really stood out to you? Did anything surprise you?
I think what struck me the most was the depth of his personal piety
Yeah.
and how it really influenced his vision for a just and equitable society. It's a reminder that leaders are often very much driven by their values,
Yeah.
and understanding those values is really key to understanding their actions.
For our listeners who are, just starting to explore history, what advice would you give them as they encounter figures like Aurangzeb, whose legacies are often, shrouded in controversy?
I would encourage them to be curious, to question assumptions,
Yeah.
and to really delve into the sources with an open mind.
Yeah.
History is full of nuances and complexities, and it's really up to us to uncover those layers and to form our own conclusions.
And to be aware of our own biases.
Yes.
And how they might influence our interpretations.
Absolutely. Well said.
Well, we're going to be back in just a moment to continue our exploration of Aurangzeb's legacy and the lasting impact that he had on the Mughal Empire, so stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and reign of Aurangzeb. We've explored his dedication to justice, his economic reforms, his impressive military achievements, and how his deep faith shaped his governance. And now I think it's time to delve into his legacy.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, despite facing numerous challenges, Aurangzeb's reign is often considered the peak of the Mughal Empire. It's a period marked by both remarkable expansion and the seeds of the empire's eventual decline.
It's a paradox. How can a period of greatness also contain the elements that lead to its downfall?
I think it highlights the cyclical nature of empires. They rise, they reach a peak, and then inevitably they face challenges that lead to their decline or transformation, and some of the very policies that contributed to his success also planted the seeds for future difficulties.
Can you elaborate on that? What were some of those policies and their unintended consequences?
Well, one example is his focus on expanding the empire, while his military conquests brought vast territories under Mughal rule. They also stretched the empire's resources thin and created new administrative challenges.
So like a company growing too quickly.
Exactly.
They might have impressive revenue, but if their infrastructure and their management can't keep up, problems are bound to arise.
Managing this vast and diverse empire became increasingly difficult,
Right.
especially with the limitations of communication and transportation in those times.
I can imagine the logistical nightmares of trying to govern an empire that stretched, from the Himalayas to the Deccan, relying on messengers on horseback and slow-moving caravans.
Absolutely. And alongside these challenges, Aurangzeb also faced constant threats of rebellion from various groups within the empire.
Like the Marathas and the Deccan.
Yes. The Marathas were a powerful force that challenged Mughal authority throughout Aurangzeb's reign. And despite his military successes against them, they remained a persistent threat, draining the empire's resources and weakening its hold on the Deccan.
So even Aurangzeb, with all of his military brilliance, couldn't completely quell their rise.
He managed to contain them to some extent, but the conflict really highlighted the limits of imperial power, especially in a geographically and culturally diverse empire like the Mughal one.
So we have a vast and increasingly difficult to manage empire and persistent external threats. What other factors contributed to the eventual decline?
Well, another point that Trisky raises is the increasing religious tensions within the empire. While Aurangzeb sincerely believed that upholding Islamic principles was crucial for just governance, some of his policies, like the reinstatement of the jizya tax, created resentment among certain segments of the population, particularly among some Hindus.
It's a reminder that even well-intentioned policies can have unintended consequences, especially when you're dealing with complex social and religious dynamics.
Aurangzeb's reign, while marked by many achievements, also witnessed an escalation of religious tensions that would ultimately contribute to the Mughal Empire's decline.
So it was a combination of factors, a vast empire that was difficult to manage, persistent external threats, and internal divisions fueled by religious tensions. It's a sobering reminder that even the most powerful empires are not immune to these internal and external pressures.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of learning from history, not just celebrating the triumphs, but also understanding the factors that led to decline.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the life and legacy of Aurangzeb, what key takeaways would you leave our listeners with?
Well, first, I think it's crucial to recognize that history is rarely black and white. Figures like Aurangzeb, who have traditionally been painted in a negative light, often have far more complex and nuanced stories than we might initially assume.
We've seen that through Trushki's research, which draws on such a rich tapestry of sources to present a more balanced and insightful perspective on Aurangzeb and his reign.
Exactly. And second, I think Aurangzeb's story reminds us that even the most powerful empires are not invincible. They're subject to internal and external pressures that can lead to their decline or transformation.
It's a reminder that we should never take stability or prosperity for granted, and that understanding the past can offer valuable insights into the challenges that we face today.
Well said. And finally, I'd encourage our listeners to continue exploring history, questioning assumptions, and engaging with different perspectives.
That's fantastic advice. The world of history is full of fascinating figures like Aurangzeb, waiting to be rediscovered and understood in new and insightful ways. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the life and times of Aurangzeb. We hope this journey has challenged your preconceptions, sparked your curiosity, and inspired you to learn more about the fascinating world of Mughal history.
Absolutely. There's so much more to discover, and we'll be back with more deep dives into history's most intriguing figures.
Until then, keep exploring, stay curious, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your fellow history enthusiasts.